still in Belgium, and I had pre-recorded some videos in Ireland, and none of them worked out the way I wanted them to. So I can't upload them, and I'm a bit limited as to what I can film here because I can't redo those videos since I don't have the stuff with me that I used in it. So I think this is the only thing I can really do to keep uploading 2 videos a week. I am aware that probably all of my audience is here for true crime, but just in case you don't like true crime, I'm really sorry. It's just gonna be for a few weeks. Once I'm back in Ireland, I'll go back to recording regular videos on Friday. So today's case was suggested by one of my subscribers called Shannon M. So thank you very much for suggesting it. And it's about Holly Bobo. Now, I listened to a podcast on this case from True Crime Garage about a year ago, and I love True Crime Garage. I listen to them all the time, but this is the only podcast they ever did that I found really confusing, and I didn't fully understand this case. So when it was suggested to me, I thought, oh god, I don't know if I can do this because it's a really lengthy case and I don't know if I really get it. So I did my own research on it, and it's clear to me now. But here's the problem. I get really confused when people mention too many names, which is why I rarely mention a victim's parents' names or siblings' names, because I find if I say, their parents or their brother or their boyfriend, it's easier to follow than if I just use people's names. I always forget who they are and then I get confused. Unfortunately, in this case, there are like 7 suspects, so I have to mention their names, but I'm gonna try to do this case as understandable as possible. So, let's get started. So, Holly Bobo was a 20-year-old nursing student from Tennessee. She was described as a person with a real zest for life. She was liked by everyone, and she was a really good student. She had a boyfriend named Drew that she had been together with for a couple of years. He had just given her a promise ring, and she was really excited for them to start their life together. So on the morning of April 13th, 2011, she'd gotten up at 4 a.m. to start studying for a test that she had at school that day. Her parents both left for work at 7 a.m. and saw her sitting at the kitchen counter studying. Now, Holly got up at all hours of the morning, frequently to study, so this was not out of the ordinary for her. So, around 7:30 a.m., she received a phone call from her boyfriend, Drew, who was turkey hunting at her grandmother's property. And at this point, her older brother Clint was at home, but he was still asleep. So around 7:45, I believe, it was shortly after the call, she left to go to school, and she walked to her car, which was parked under the carport at her house. Now, a neighbor reported that she heard screams coming from the house, and she repeatedly heard Holly yelling, "Stop it." She called Holly's mother to tell her what she heard. Around 7:50 a.m., Clint woke up to the dog barking really loudly. Now, at this point, he didn't hear Holly yell or make any noise, but he did realize something was wrong because the dog never behaved this way. He then heard 2 voices outside arguing. He heard a female voice, which he immediately knew was his sister Holly's, and then he assumed the male voice was her boyfriend Drew because it sounded like they were arguing and he thought they were breaking up. So he then looked out the So she said to her son Clint to take the gun and shoot the guy. Now, like, Clint had only just woken up, so he was still convinced this was true, and he was like, "What, do you want me to shoot Drew?" So the mother hung up, called 911, but since she was at work, she got put through to a dispatcher from a different county. So Clint, in the meantime, looked out the window again and saw that Holly was walking towards the woods with a man. And when he saw this man standing up, he immediately knew it wasn't Drew because this man was much larger. So he then ran out the house to the carport and saw about 60 drops of Holly's blood, and he then himself called 911. So immediately after the abduction, an extensive search was done. There were large search parties, helicopters, dogs, everything was involved. They researched Holly's cell phone. Well, they found that Holly's cell phone was nowhere to be found, so they assumed she had it with her. So they started looking into the pings and stuff like that. And they found that at 8:17 a.m. it pinged heading north on a road near a wooded area. Then between 8:30 and 9 there was no activity. And then at 9 the phone started moving south in the opposite direction on the same road. So police searched these routes and found several items belonging to Holly scattered along some back roads. They found her homework, her notebook, her cell phone, and SIM card, which had been removed from the phone, and her lunchbox. Now, the first suspect was Clint, her older brother, because he was home at the time, but they quickly ruled him out. However, a lot of people kind of have sketchy ideas about Clint, but I'll get back to that. So there were 4 guys that attracted their attention. 2 brothers called Dylan and Zach Adams, and then 2 cousins called Shane Austin and Jason Autry. Now, at the time, the police didn't have enough evidence linking them to Holly's disappearance, but they are important in the case, and I'll get back to them later. So they turned their attention to a guy called Terry Britt, who was a known sex offender in the area. I'm sorry, I'm looking at my notes so much in this case, but there's so many names and so much information that it was really hard for me to remember this one. So they strongly believed that Terry was responsible for Holly's abduction because Terry had a type. He liked blonde girls with blue eyes, which is what Holly was. And when they asked him for his alibi, he said that he went shopping for a bathtub with his wife, but the store has no record of him buying anything there, so his alibi is kind of sketchy. His home was also in the area that Holly's phone was pinged, and they searched the house with cadaver dogs, which pointed to 2 of Terry's vehicles and several tools around the house, but they tested it for DNA, and they couldn't find any of Holly's DNA. Ultimately, they had to let go of Terry because they didn't have enough evidence linking him to Holly's case. So in March 2014, the attention shifted back to the 4 guys that I mentioned earlier. These men were known to be best friends, and they were also known to be small criminals, so they were known with law enforcement, but not for anything major. Now, what attracted police to them is that Zach Adams, one of the 2 brothers, went around town bragging about, he went around town talking about Holly's disappearance and bragging about how he had done it. So, police already had his younger brother Dylan Adams in custody, and they decided to ask him about Holly's disappearance. Zach had been bragging about it. He ended up telling the police that they were all responsible for her disappearance and that they had all sexually assaulted her at Zach's house and killed her, and that Zach had made a video about this. Now, the problem was that Dylan had how do you say this? He had an intellectual disability, so he didn't have the highest IQ. And his story about who killed her changed all the time, because at first it was Zach and then it was Jason, and it wasn't very consistent. So the police was afraid that he wasn't going to be a very credible witness in court. So they approached Shane Austin, which is one of the two cousins, and offered him an immunity deal if he would, like, rat out the others, which he took. But he couldn't give them any details about her kidnapping because, as we remember, there was only one guy doing it, presumably Zach, so Shane wasn't there. And he either couldn't or wouldn't tell them where Holly's body was. So police eventually felt that they did have enough evidence, so they arrested Zach on the 5th of March and charged him for her kidnapping and her murder. And shortly after, they did the same with Jason Autry, who was the other of the two cousins. The case then took another strange turn when police arrested two other brothers called Jeff and Mark Piercy. Apparently, one of Jeff's old roommates went to the police and said that Jeff had shown her a video of Holly being sexually assaulted at Zach's house, and he said that he got that video from his brother Mark, who apparently recorded it. Now, police never found this video, and the brothers always maintained their innocence, and ultimately they weren't prosecuted because, there just wasn't sufficient evidence to do that. So on September 7th, 2014, hunters stumbled upon human remains, which turned out to be Holly's, and she had a bullet hole in the back of her skull. She was found in the exact location that her phone was pinging on the day she disappeared, and it was about 6 miles from Zach's house. I just want to pause here for a second, okay? She was found in the exact same location that her phone pinged on the day she disappeared. Why did it take them almost a year to find her? Like, they looked at the places where, it took them over a year to find her. They looked in the places where her phone pinged. At least that's what they said. Now, it's not confirmed by the coroner when she died. I think after such a long time, it's really hard to determine that. But her date of death is listed everywhere as the day she disappeared. Now, even if she had only died a few days later, even if it was a few weeks later, they searched for weeks, maybe even months. How did they miss this one spot where her body was? Because from everything I understand, they killed her on the same day and disposed of her body. So I don't understand if it was found in the exact location that her phone pinged, why they didn't find her sooner. Yeah. So 10 days after Holly's remains were found, Dylan, the younger brother with the mental disability, was also charged in her case. The Piercy brothers' charges were dropped because they couldn't find the video, but police do still believe they had something to do with it. So Shane Austin, the guy who they offered the immunity deal to, was found dead in a hotel room later on. He had committed suicide, which again I find very suspicious because he was given immunity, so he wasn't going to go to jail for this anyway, but maybe he got scared that either people would come after him for revenge or that, he somehow would still get arrested for this. like he genuinely, like he's talking about a dead rodent or something like that. Like he genuinely just doesn't seem to care at all. So on September 22nd, 2017, over 6 years after her murder, a jury found Zach Adams guilty of first-degree murder, especially aggravated kidnapping and aggravated rape. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole and 2 25-year sentences for her kidnap and rape. Now his younger brother Dylan pled guilty on January 18th, 2018 to charges of facilitation of first-degree murder and especially aggravated kidnapping. He was sentenced to 15 years for facilitation of first-degree murder and 35 years for especially aggravated kidnapping. Now, I searched for Jason Autry's sentence, and a lot of people on Reddit were saying, well, has anyone heard about his trial? Surely he'll get a trial. Other people were like, yeah, we expect him to get a trial. I looked for this everywhere, and I found that they had given Jason Autry an immunity deal. Pretty much what they had offered Shane, but Shane killed himself. Now, on the one hand, I understand this. I understand that because Shane killed himself, they didn't have a lot of leverage going forward, and also Shane's story was not very detailed. So on the one hand, I understand that they offered Jason the same deal so that they would have a stronger case against Zach. But on the other hand, I don't get it. I'm like, why would you offer this guy an immunity deal? When I read that he offered to testify for a lesser sentence, that I got, and I genuinely believe that he would have done it for a lesser sentence and that you don't need to give him immunity. Like, this girl was brutally assaulted and murdered. Why the hell would you let one of them just go? Like, oh, that really pisses me off. This whole case infuriates me because it's clear that they targeted her. They knew her morning routine. Like, Zach, or at least who we assume was Zach, was waiting for her when she left her house. So it's clear to me that they specifically targeted her and they just wanted to kill her. Like, for what? Just because they felt like it? Like, this poor girl. And the part that aggravates me the most is her brother, who didn't do anything. Like, the moment that he saw her walking into the woods with a guy that he knew wasn't true, why didn't he run after them? He saw them through the window going into the woods, which means they couldn't have been that far. His mother had previously said to shoot that guy, so clearly he had a gun. Why didn't he immediately grab the gun, run after them into the woods, and either shoot the guy or at least threaten to shoot the guy? Like, a lot of people believe, and I 100% believe, that Holly would still be alive if her brother had gone after them. Instead, he went to the carport, found blood on the floor, and called 911. Why the hell didn't he run after them when he found that blood? I mean, they couldn't have been that far away, and they weren't running. They were quietly walking into the woods. This is just completely beyond me. Yeah, that's really it for this case. Terry Britt was never prosecuted, but it's interesting to note that the investigating officer who investigated Terry Britt had blinders on, and he wouldn't move on from him to other suspects, and he was ultimately removed from the case before police then went on to these 4 guys. And the investigating police officer to this day believes that Terry Britt actually killed Holly. Because Clint's description matched Terry Britt. So, I don't know. There's so many details in this case that I can't, list all of them. I personally don't know the details of whether Zach always denied it or whether there's too many inconsistencies in all their stories, but the Jason all confessed makes me